Good evening, everyone. After after the situation in Caucasus last week, I decided to do a special round of conversations on the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan and the territory of Nagorno-Karabakh, disputed territory in the Nagorno-Karabakh region, because we have similarities between the two regions. People tend to make conclusions based exclusively on religion, or if they feel empathy based on their religion with one of the sides in the conflict. So even though there are some similarities between the two regions, between the two stories, especially when it comes to we tend to think that Soviet Union, dissolution of the Soviet Union wasn't so dramatic like it was in the Balkans, and it stands for the Baltics, it stands for the Central Asia mostly, except for Tajikistan. They had the civil war also there. It stands for Ukraine and Belarus up to a certain degree, but conflicts that were happening in the Caucasus were, if not even more dramatic than those in the Balkans. One of those conflicts is Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. It started in 1988. The newest iteration, let's say, the last war that it has been going on and off for the last 30 plus years, but it has historical roots, just like all the conflicts in the Balkans. The result of the conflict is that we have internationally recognized territory of Azerbaijan under the control of the Armenians. We have people who lost their homes. Many people were expelled. Many people were ethnically cleansed from territory. So now, when you look at the map of the region in Nagorno-Karabakh, especially the city of Jabrail that has been, Azerbaijanis would say, liberated, you can see that there are whole cities, ghost cities in this area. So I wouldn't take much more time from our conversation, from our distinguished guest, and I want to thank him. With us tonight is Rauf Mammadov. Rauf is Azerbaijani who lives in DC. Rauf is a resident scholar at the Middle East Institute. Prior to that, he was holding top managerial positions in the state oil company of Azerbaijan, SOCAR, and several years ago, he started even in the office of SOCAR in DC, and he left in 2016 and decided to continue his career, his academic career. Rauf, good evening. Thank you very much for joining us. And I want to start with asking you a question. How are you? Even though you're in DC, I think that you are very much focused on what's happening back in your homeland. So what can you tell us what's happening right now in the region and in your home country?
Thank you for having me, Ilbamir. I really appreciate. I'm an Azerbaijani, but I'll try to be as objective as possible to bring the perspective. The last 8 days has been incredible, probably the most intense days I've ever lived through. You can tell probably from the sleepless nights that I have, this is the end result. The most recent clashes, or this is already a full-scale war, started on September 27th. It's been going on already for 9 days. The roots of the conflict go deep. The most recent one goes back to the 90s. You mentioned about the Balkans. Actually, a couple of years ago, when I was reading the several books about the independent journalists who wrote about the Karabakh, they were all mentioning that one of the reasons why Karabakh didn't get much attention actually was Balkans, because it was happening at the same time, and Balkan issue has become more priority issue for the foreign policy of the United States, whereas Karabakh became a peripheral issue. And I wish that wasn't the case. Maybe if there was enough attention that it was given to Balkans in 90s, we have been living in a different situation at the moment. That's not the case. The first war started when I was 6 or 7 and ended when I was 12, ended with the defeat of Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan not only lost Nagorno-Karabakh, but also lost 7 other districts, provinces. One of them is Jabrail, as you have mentioned here. The Armenian side's claim was that these are the buffer zones in order to protect Nagorno-Karabakh from possible offensive Azerbaijan, what we're seeing at the moment. There was a ceasefire agreement signed in '94 in Bishkek agreement. The motivation for the agreement was that there will be solution found to the conflict, and the international institutions and OSCE Minsk group, which was designated for this problem, comprised of the co-chairs from Russia, France, and United States, and the reason because these countries were chosen because Russia was representing the region, France was representing the Europe, and the United States was representing Americas. So that was the division of responsibilities. Unfortunately, for the last 26 years, there was no solution. There was warm up in the negotiation process, or some hope for solutions throughout the certain years, but that has never materialized. And what we're seeing right now is the failure of international institutions and failure of the negotiation process. Most recently, for the last 2 years, since the government change in Armenia, as we know, there was a revolution in Armenia, and Nikol Pashinyan, the current prime minister, came to power. There was another false hope that the new democratic leadership of Armenia will be more willing because of his background and also because of his initial posture regarding the conflict, and also the fact that he's the first leader of Armenia that is not from Karabakh, that there will be some progress. That took us another 2 years with no progress at all. Actually, Pashinyan's attitude changed very dramatically, very radically. He, unlike the previous Karabakh-born presidents, and most of them actually also fought in Azerbaijani territories for Nagorno-Karabakh, and also all of them were born in Azerbaijan as well, I guess. So technically, Pashinyan's posture has changed radically, and he started making statements that those Karabakh-born leaders didn't even make, such as Karabakh is Armenia, we will recognize Karabakh, and then we will transfer the capital from Stepanakert, Khankendi, as Azerbaijanis say, to Shusha, or Shushi, as Armenians say, which was a final tipping point for Azerbaijanis, because Shusha is like a Mecca of Karabakh for Azerbaijanis and for Armenians as well. And making these provocative statements, as it's perceived by Azerbaijani leadership and as an average Azerbaijani, was a last tipping point. What happened actually was, of course, there's the Armenian side is saying that there's an offensive by Azerbaijanis. Azerbaijan is saying that there was provocation on that Saturday night from that the war erupted. Azerbaijan is saying that it's a counteroffensive in response to Armenian provocations, attacks to its civilians. But at the end of the day, the war started 9 days ago. there were three flanks that Azerbaijanis were implemented the counteroffensive: the northern, the center, and southern flanks. Most of the progress was made in the southern flank, the Jabrail and Fizuli, the Iranian border areas. Again, these are not Nagorno-Karabakh territories. This is the part of the buffer zone. The northern flank is very mountainous. It's high.
Talish, the city of Talish and Magadis. Yeah.
Morov Docks, it's the Talish. These are very, very difficult terrain to get, but there was made progress by Azerbaijanis, very surprisingly, on that area as well. That put Armenian supply lines under danger in the northern flank. The least progress, I think the least successful that Azerbaijani army has been was the center flank, which is the terrain is easier, and we see that most of the failure attacks were made there. The game changer in this fight are the Turkish and Israeli made drones, the UAVs. Azerbaijan is using them for multiple purposes, again to inflict damage on the supply lines of Armenians, to attack their artillery, and also to keep Armenian cities under, especially Stepanakert, under constant psychological pressure. Azerbaijani side also claims that drones are helpful because they're thanks to drones there are less civilian victims because they're very precise and targeted. But that's the overall situation at the moment we are facing now. For the last 2 days, there was no ground offensive. The weather was cloudy. The drones were not effective. Yesterday, there was a report that Azerbaijani side, especially Armenian sides, were reporting that Azerbaijani side starting attacking again. But there wasn't made any statements regarding, or any Azerbaijani side especially hasn't made any statements regarding liberation of any other villages. The international mediation, international or external players, I can tell you that there has been several statements. The Russia and Iran, the two regional countries, have opted not to interfere directly. Although Russia has military base in Armenia, Armenia proper, not the Nagorno-Karabakh, Armenia proper, in Gyumri.
In Gyumri, yes, on the Turkish border.
And then Armenian borders with Russia and Iran with Georgia and Iran and Turkey, Iran and Turkey is protected by Russian FSB. So that's that. And there have been reports that Russia has been supplying arms after the July skirmishes and recently as well through Iran. But both sides has said that, even Putin a couple hours earlier said that they will not interfere unless Armenia proper is attacked, which triggers the CSTO agreement, the collective security agreement that Armenia and Russia has. Iran's first stance was rhetorically they were neutral, but they were allowing Russian arm supply to Armenia, with Azerbaijanis protesting in Armenia and on the government level. That seems like has stopped, or there are no reports about that. Georgia in the beginning was and has become neutral, but the Armenians are claiming that Georgia is still allowing its airspace for the
Turkish cargo.
Turkish supplies to Azerbaijan. France, Macron sided with Armenia in the beginning. That kind of contradicts with the OSCE's, as an OSCE co-chair position, that you cannot take side. America, again, United States, generally checked out from the region. They just singing to the choir. They have just joined the statement which was initially made by Russia and France of immediate ceasefire. That's where we stand internationally at the moment. There were allegations. I think one important note is that there were allegations that the Syrian fighters were transferred from Syria to Azerbaijan. That hasn't been confirmed yet, although some of the reputable news agencies have made the news, but referring to very ambiguous sources, such as rebel fighters or relatives. There hasn't been any proof, any credible proof in my mind presented, but there are allegations, and also some high-level officials, such as the Russian officials, like Naryshkin, had made the statement that they're also not mentioning Azerbaijan, but they say that there is a concern that some terrorists are being transferred to the region. There were also reports recently, yesterday, that the Russian Wagner mercenaries are fighting on Armenian side. The Telegram channel of the Russian the Wagners shared some very provocative pictures, which allegedly were taken.
I've seen it. It was like they were on the airport boarding the plane.
But it hasn't been confirmed either. So this is where we stand at the moment.
You started. You already kind of responded to my question. Next question, because we talked about the international reactions on the global level, but on the regional level, you touched the subject a little bit there, and it is important for us in the Balkans to understand it, because, as I said at the beginning of the conversation, people are tending to take sides based on their religion. And when you know the region, it's a bit different. So you mentioned the Georgia's role. Georgia is Eastern Orthodox country, like one side of the conflict in the Balkans, and Azerbaijanis are Muslims, Shia Muslims mostly. What I know about this Azerbaijan, I don't know much, but it's more of a secular country. And when it comes to Armenia, their Christianity would be regarded as most religious Puritans in the Balkans as a heresy. So based on the religion, there is not much there to be aligned with, but still people tend to do that. Also, very importantly, you touched the subject of Iran, which is home to more Azerbaijanis than live in the actual country of independent Azerbaijan. So there is almost double population of, almost double population of Azerbaijanis living in the region of Azerbaijan within Iran. So basically the question is, how do you comment this? What would you say to the Balkan people? Is it an ethnic conflict, basically? Or is it a conflict that includes, how do you think that the responsibility of the leadership on both sides affects this? You mentioned Pashinyan's change of heart after he took power, but can you comment a little bit on this regional aspect, and on the other side, the responsibility of the leaders and their accountability in their hand in the whole in the conflict?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Regarding the religion has nothing to do with this conflict. Nothing. It has to be discounted from the beginning. It's a ethnic, it's a territorial conflict. It's the problem of two nations that have lived together throughout the centuries that are having difficult time with finding a solution of coexistence. That's the core of the problem. That's where it stands for. When it comes to the leadership's positions, of course, the domestic politics matter as well. We have talked about the Pashinyan's change of the discourse. Aliyev understands the Azerbaijani president also understands the public demand in Azerbaijan, because at the end of the day, for 30 years, for 26 years, this country has been, the people of Azerbaijan has felt that trauma of being a loser in the conflict. You know, we have lost the first stage of the war, so there was a trauma. Truly yours have lived through it, and I have now feeling that we have had that trauma. I have friends who are IDPs, you know, internal displaced people who cannot go see their parents' graves in Jabrail or in other parts. I'm sure Armenians have the same. I mean, would have had the same if their territories were occupied as well. So it's a problem of a coexistence. You know, it's as in Bosnia and Serbia and as in Balkans, you know, there are at least there are attempts to find solutions, and there is a solution to this problem as well. But so far, both leaders have failed to do so. And it's not happening in the vacuum either. In Armenia, the hopes for the democratic leadership that came to power will be less nationalistic, will be more open to negotiations. That didn't yield any results because of that nationalist, strong nationalist view within the Armenia, because that, you know, he was getting so much opprobrium, so much criticism for not being nationalist enough, or for preparing to withdraw, potentially to withdraw. That was the allegations that was made to Pashinyan from the occupied territories, or in their understanding, it's buffer zones. In Azerbaijan as well, Aliyev, going through these domestic economic issues, he also had to deal with the growing concerns regarding the Karabakh. It all piled up, you know, COVID, economic issues, and then July skirmishes which happened, where the general of Azerbaijani army was killed, not in even a disputed territory in Tovuz, which is bordering Georgia. This part was not part of the conflict. So that kind of added up, and that was the last drop, I guess, for the conflict to restart. Iran's role is very interesting, actually. Iran is caught between rock and the hard place, because on one hand, Iran is Shia Iran, is trying to take a role in a possible resolution of the conflict, because Iran has always been afraid of Turkey's increasing influence in the region. On the other hand, Iran's active foreign policy is inhibited with the fact, as you have mentioned, that there are more than 27 million Azerbaijanis living there. Every third Iranian, maybe less, is Azerbaijani.
Some of the famous leaders of Iran are, we don't know it, but they are ethnic Azerbaijanis. Yeah. Ali Khamenei was,
Khamenei's leader was, they say that he was Azerbaijan. She was Azerbaijani as well. The Prince Farah was Azerbaijani. The last Princess Farah, the last princess, was Azerbaijani as well. So there is that connection. And there, you know, after the World War II, there was the independent Azerbaijani Republic on the northern part. It was communist, but it was still independent republic. So there is that trauma for Iranians as well. And as weak as Iran it is right now, with the ongoing problems with the West, with the sanctions, and with internal problems with domestic, with democratic issues, they cannot risk of having another problem on their table. And there were indications that Azerbaijanis have already started to, in Iran, Azerbaijanis in Iran have already started protesting against Russian supplies through Iran to Armenia. So Iran's situation is very peculiar. They have been very careful in their statements. They have made statements. The religious leaders of Iran, especially the representatives of Khamenei, they were making pro-Azerbaijan statements for their domestic audience. Internationally, also, for the last 2 days, we saw that there were the government's representative had made a statement saying that they uphold Azerbaijan's integral territory. So they're trying to balance, but they're also trying to be part of the negotiation process. Lavrov and Zarif have started talking frequently lately. Yesterday they had another telephone conversation. That means that Iran, whatever is happening, Iran is trying to jump on the wagon and try to be part of the solution. To what extent they will be successful, it's under question, because the current format includes United States as well. The OSCE Minsk group includes United States as well. And United States will, of course, will not be happy to see Iran in part of that format, or in part of any format that will include United States as the co-chair. But that doesn't mean that Iran cannot contribute to the solution, because all the parties are at least officially are for immediate ceasefire, except Turkey, of course. Turkey still has the precondition of Armenia withdrawing from internationally recognized territories of Azerbaijan, which is the Nagorno-Karabakh. So that's where we stand. But again, religion has nothing to do with this. It is. I know some circles are trying to emphasize the religious aspect, but Azerbaijan is one of the most secular countries in the world. It's geographically Shia, but has never been part of that Shia belt or Shia political discourse. It has always tried to balance among all the countries. It's not the best geography to be in, and for Armenia as well. You know, you're surrounded by three big empires: Russia, Turkey, and Iran. So therefore, you have to try to balance throughout this. Of course, people are still, you know, proud to be Muslim, but that Islam is not the priority for the foreign policy of the country.
The other difference is, as you mentioned, ethnicity. Like in the Balkans, for example, most of the nations, even though you have religious differences, but ethnically we are very close. We're part of the Slavic nations, except for the Albanians, who are different. There is a language, cultural barrier, and there were no contacts between. And in the Caucasus, you have 46 languages are spoken. In the region of Caucasus, within Armenia, you don't have many national minorities, but for example, within Azerbaijan, there are different national minorities in the north, Georgia with ethnicities and sub-ethnicities, and then we come to the northern Caucasus, which is like a palette of all these different nations which are coming from completely different roots. There is no single identity. So it's much more different. Here, religion was the reason and the rationale for making nations. It was the criteria how the nations were made. In the Balkans, as you mentioned it, in the Caucasus, it's a bit different. I wanted to ask you, as you are one of the voices that is trying to be very objective, and I can tell that by your writings, especially on Twitter. And I want to ask you one question regarding Armenians, feelings of Armenians. So you mentioned the trauma of almost 800 Azerbaijanis becoming IDPs throughout Azerbaijan.
Yeah.
I was trying to explain to my wife, for example, when we were going through Georgia, my wife is Russian, so when she was speaking Russian, I was telling her that sometimes she might meet someone who was displaced from Abkhazia, and that we need to understand some feelings when we live there. So the question is, the trauma, Armenian historical trauma, the thing that they lived through what was happening in the Turkey and after the fall of the Ottoman Empire, the genocide, what they call the genocide that has happened, the displacement of so many people. So it has been exploited in this last conflict, the fear that if Azerbaijan takes over Nagorno-Karabakh, if Azerbaijan reclaims its territories, that they will suffer the same destiny like their forefathers in Turkey. Do you think that the Azerbaijani leadership have done enough to uh, to assure Armenians that there will be no reprisals, there will be no no revenge, and if not, do you think there is a way how it can be done?
Yes, that's a very good question. That's the whole gist of the coexistence, I guess. And I agree with you that it has been exploited by both sides politically. I don't really believe that Armenians are facing the existential crisis in Nagorno-Karabakh, but I do believe that it's not an easy issue. You know, it's first of all, everything will be decided on the ground. We're still far from that. That's first. We're still the fighting is still going on. Armenians are defending. Azerbaijanis are trying to get their lands back. So we're still far from that. And according to Armenian sources, Azerbaijan hasn't even made any progress. So there is that's kind of contradictory.
It's correct.
But the Armenian leadership has been trying to say that it's an existential crisis and they're trying to link it to that trauma of early 20th century. And I understand that the trauma is still there. There have been for a century there have been, you know, from generation to generations, Armenians were told these stories, and there are some facts as well. I don't deny that. The Azerbaijani side hasn't done enough to assure first Armenians that will not happen, and the second, the international community. But there are some glimpses of hope. There are some actions that are being taken. Of course, everything will be decided on the ground, and secondly, the actions will speak louder than the words. And I hope that I believe that any solution to this problem still lays in the political solution. Even if militarily Azerbaijan liberates the parts of that you know that belongs internationally recognized parts of this territory, we'll still have to have Armenians live in that territory because they have lived there as well. Azerbaijani leadership is not denying that. The question is whether there will be what the practical solutions will be taking to assure the safety of Armenians in that region. That I think will require international involvement as well, as we have seen in Balkans, you know, between Bosnians and Serbians in the Republic of Srpska and other territories. I believe that solution will entail some engagement of peacemakers, whether they are Russian, international, or maybe European, or Turkish as well. You know, Turkish protecting the Azerbaijanis and Russians protecting the Armenians, so that there are not Armenian Azerbaijani forces on the ground, so that there are no as is in Syrian option, what we see in Syria. I don't know to what extent that's possible at the moment, because we still don't know how the military situation will end. How to what extent Azerbaijan will progress, or whether it will progress or not into further Nagorno-Karabakh. But any solution, I agree with you, that will require the providing that coexistence. Azerbaijani side have I don't believe they have done enough yet, because it's still developing story, and also there are also issues within Azerbaijan as well. You know, democratic issues with the democracy, with the civil society. There are so many others. So is in Armenia as well. Armenia had many. Even with the Pashinyan's regime, there were major issues regarding the political issues as well. So this is still a developing story. This is still a new. I'm hoping that the negotiation process will start soon, and within that negotiation process, there will be a solution embedded in it, which will entail the peaceful coexistence of both nations finally, because that's the only solution. I was born and raised in Sumgayit. We all remember the 1988 Sumgait pogroms. And our next door neighbor was Armenian. I was 6 when this happened. I asked my dad recently when the war started, I asked him, you know, how was your relations with Suren? That was his name. And he said that Suren was more Azerbaijani than any Azerbaijani. His identity wise was Azerbaijani. By the way, the Armenians, Baku and Sumgait, or Armenians who lived in Azerbaijan, especially in big cities, they have more Azerbaijani identity than they had Azerbaijani identity. And the same thing goes for Azerbaijanis living in Armenia as
well. If you can
so
just, that's a good question, because many people in the Balkans don't know about the pogroms. It was the reaction, it was 1998, this was the country that was falling apart. Protests were happening in the Nagorno-Karabakh region. There were some stories coming from the region. There were some disinformation spread around people that there were atrocities in Nagorno-Karabakh. The mob gathered and started entering Armenian houses, right? Homes, and there were many atrocities, and it was called Sumgait pogroms. And as you mentioned, your neighbors were Armenian. There were many people suffered. On the other side, there was many positive stories of Azerbaijanis hiding their own neighbors.
My family did that, by the way. My family. But
congratulations. There were stories like this. Unfortunately, there were less stories like that, but there were stories like that here in my city of Budva, that Muslims were deported back to Republika Srpska. Some of the people were hidden and helped by the local Montenegrins to flee to the Western Europe. So there were also some good stories. I just wanted to clear out, because not many people know about that. It still was far from the Nagorno-Karabakh region. Is on the near Baku, eastern part of Azerbaijan.
Sumgait is 20-minute drive from Baku. It's a satellite town. It's industrial town. It's just 61 years old. That's how young the town is. It used to be very international. It's still international because there are still Russians living in it, but it used to be very international because all the workers from all around the Soviet Union came there. It was still USSR when this happened. Azerbaijani side is even claiming that the Russian KGB, Soviet KGB was involved in it as well, but there was an angry mob and that happened. Unfortunately, Armenians died.
Like they say.
This happened, but there are, it's part of the trauma. It all adds up, and then there was, in 1992, during the war, there was Khojaly massacre when the civilians got killed, with innocent people got stuck there and killed. So there all these traumas are there. I'm sure Srebrenica in Balkans is part of the trauma, but again, people cannot live with these traumas and cannot add more traumas to it. They have to find a solution. I think more people, more Armenians, Azerbaijanis talk to each other. Even earlier today in Twitter, an Armenian Twitter account made a mistake, and he was getting all the harsh criticism. I stepped up. I said, listen, if you're gonna yell to each other like this, there's already a fight going on in the world. If you're going to yell at each other like this, we're not going to solve anything. At least just tell him that this was a mistake, and I hope that you will correct the mistake. And that's what it happened. I think that's how the communication should go. At least, and we as anyone who talks to Armenian on Twitter, I'm telling you this, and on the Armenian side as well, are being labeled as traitors right away. And we get that, we risk that as well. I mean, it's not an easy thing. So, but we still believe that the reason will win. And when the people talk to each other, they will find solution. Of course, this might sound very rosy to you, but I don't right now, I don't see any other. And there is a precedent. For 70 years during the Soviet time, people lived next to each other. They married, they intermarried, they lived, Armenians in Sumgait, in Baku, didn't live in quarters or in isolated. They were living within, Azerbaijani
General
proper,
population, huh?
Azerbaijanis were living, and many other ethnic minorities as well, as Talush, Lezgi, or Tats, as I am. We all lived together, and we coexisted. I think that's a good example. There is something that we can build on. But for that, the issue had to be solved. And what Azerbaijani leadership right now thinks is that the best way to solve it, because they see no other option with the assertive statements of Armenia, is getting back everything militarily. I hope that negotiations will restart soon, and then solutions will be found.
There's no better way to finish the conversation than on a positive note, and to hope. It's not rosy, it's optimistic. Is the only way we can do it. It's hope for the best and hope for the end of the conflict, for the betterment of both peoples. So Rauf, I am just, what is left to be said is that I want to thank you for the participation in this. I'm going to try to translate it and subtitle it in our languages, but I don't promise that because it's hard work to do it. So, but I think that we help a certain population of Balkans and Montenegro, helped understand this conflict better. Thank you very much one more time, and have a great day.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.